A very good evening to all our viewers. Thank you for making time and be with us on the edition of today's Evening Review. My name is Toivon Jabela, your host. Tonight on the show, I'm joined by my colleague, Mathias Haufiku. He is news editor of Namibian Sun. And we just want to weigh in on the recent political developments in the country, especially in the ruling party, which had its central committee over the weekend. Mathias, thank you for making time.
I don't know, it's good. It's always good to be here, sitting on this side of the,
yeah? of the table. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, let's talk about what do you make of the outcome of the central committee meeting, especially the filling of those secretarial positions?
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's much of a surprise because normally, and especially after congresses, the candidates that emerges as winners at those congresses, they would ordinarily also command a huge following as far as filling the secretariat positions is concerned. And that's what played out over the weekend also. It doesn't really come much as a surprise because it would be an anomaly for someone to do good at Congress, but then those behind them or their team they don't dominate the secretariat. It's almost unheard of.
Yeah. Does it empower, because I mean everybody says the Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah supporters who dominated those elections, does it put her in a good position then to say, to carry out her mandate, having all this backing behind her?
Yeah, I think it surely affirms her power within the party, because there's been murmurs around this Congress to say perhaps there are plans to oust her and what. I think that this really just cements her position now to say, look, she's the one. And anyone who would probably have ulterior views or motive would have to think twice. Because, I mean, it is a powerful structure, decision-making one for that matter. So I think it puts the ball firmly in our court.
Yeah. So that means also then that, because obviously this is the secretariat, but the entire central committee is also dominated by her supporters, and being the highest decision-making body between congresses, it means even if anybody had tried to call for an extraordinary congress or whatever, that will never pass this structure that has her backing.
Yeah. One could say that, but you never know in politics. Things change. I mean, there's a lot of foes who are seemingly friends today. So things change, but knowing how the ruling party operates, you don't see things swinging drastically now. I think from now on it's sort of a cruise control thing. Whatever is planned, it will happen in a certain manner. Also, the party also doesn't want to go into elections with friction within its ranks. So I think they will closely safeguard that unity aspect, whether it's real or perceived. The disunity, of course. I think they will do all their best to ensure that they go to the polls as a united front.
Yeah. It's not a secret, Mathias, that the president, Hage Geingob, doesn't seem to be in favor, or a lot of those people don't seem to be actually perceive him as one of their own. There's always been speculation about who he supported at Congress, and after Congress he made those remarks about extraordinary congresses and whatnot, and then those that are perceived to have not been supported by him emerged victorious. So in the top four in particular, the three from VP to Deputy SG, all of them seem to have been in one camp. And then you find the Central Committee looking the way it does. So how much power is he left with in the context of all that, the president?
Well, as a leader of the party, he would still command a huge base as far as power is concerned. But obviously, him being a seasoned politician, he also knows the reality on the ground as to where the power dynamics are not fully within his control anymore. So he has to make certain adjustments. And you'll see that his posture has since changed from the statement he made at the announcement of the Congress results. as far as the extraordinary Congress is concerned. So he sort of changed. And I'm thinking he's realizing that it's not a carte blanche situation for him anymore. So he needs to, there's a certain parts where it needs to be a give and take situation as far as power or decision making is concerned in the party. And Geingob has been around for long. I'm sure he would know how to navigate this.
Yeah.
Of course, he won't walk into landmines that he can see. Surely he also had alternative, perhaps, scenarios. If the person he supported didn't win, how would it play out, and how does he then react to that? So those are all of the things I believe. Surely he has it covered. I mean, it would be unwise for someone at that level in the political space not to read the temperature in the room. Yeah.
And we saw on, was it Friday or Saturday, when I think it was Saturday, when he posted on his social media pages that Netumbo is our sole candidate for 2024. Which is exactly what you are saying, that the tone has changed. That was not the outright words he uttered after Congress. So it means that the idea of any idea of extraordinary Congress has been eliminated. Is that because perhaps he realizes that even if he was determined to do that the idea would simply not pass?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, the dynamics have changed since November 2022. There's a lot happening in the background. Of course, we would not be privy to all the details, but at least as far as to what we know, the Netumbo camp seem to be the ones calling the shot now. And that perhaps explains the change of his tone. And of course, ordinarily you'd expect that, because you wouldn't want a situation whereby you are trying to be bullish and ignoring the facts on the ground. I mean, that's what politicians do. They fluctuate all the time depending on the circumstances they find themselves in.
Yeah. One strange thing that seemed to have remained as is his statement late last year that he will carry on as party president until the next Congress in 2027, which creates two centers of power, and an idea that he hated so much himself in the past. Again, does that speak then to the fluctuations that you're talking about? That now suddenly the circumstances would be favorable for him to continue in that position?
Yeah, it certainly speaks to it, because you have to realize that when you are the state president and you are not the party president, there's a lot of issues that might come your way that you won't be able to tackle because you are not there at that level. And of course, you are still accountable to the party.
Yeah.
So would you want that? Where you are not firmly in control of that structure. So I think that's what's probably weighing on his mind to say, but if I leave the party position and I'm just focusing on State House, how would it play out politically? Also, just there's a lot of, he still commands a huge following, make no mistake, but his people are not the ones who are calling the shots anymore. So now, if he also leaves that space vacant, what is he left with and his followers?
Yeah, one of the things that have been said was to say, look, if he had quit the party presidency this year, for example, that would have necessitated an extraordinary Congress, perhaps. But instead of doing that, why don't you allow the 2024 elections to take place? You are party president. Netumbo is a party candidate. If she wins immediately after inauguration in 2025, then you quit the party presidency as Hage Geingob, and it will not compromise Netumbo in any way anymore.
Yeah.
But if you quit now, it would mean that Netumbo will be subjected to another contest again, people vying for the position of a party president. So why doesn't he leave after March 2025?
Yeah. Well, those reasons would probably just be known to him. But as the architect of this notion of a one center of power, it doesn't sit well from a principal point of view. That how is it now that now you are flip-flopping? And he never really gave a solid reason as to why he now opted that he'll stay on until 2027. He never gave that solid reason. The way he convincingly told his party cadres as to why he thinks two centers of power is not the best situation for the party, and people followed it. Because I also felt at the time that the argument was solid, why you wouldn't want to have two centers of power. But now he changed, but we don't really, there's no back point to say this is why I think I should stay on and renege on what I said earlier.
Yeah. One of the challenges, I think we, as a country, we experienced it briefly between 2005 and 2007, the two centers of power. President Mahamba having been elected as country president in 2005, but the Swapo Congress was only going to take place in 2007. It was 2007, and there was a lot of uncertainty. The country doesn't really know where we are heading to, whether there are ill intentions on the part of the founding president clinging on to power, while we have another guy running state, especially when he was the one endorsing Mahamba at the time. It sounded as if now the man is your real puppet now. You usher him into State House, you retain power at the party level, and but luckily, it looks as if Nwema had genuine intentions. He was just, sort of clearing his desk. In 2007, after I think 47 years in power as party president, he then allowed the President Mahamba to have both state and party powers, which I think worked well for Mahamba in his time. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it worked well, but the dynamics were different. I think it would have been much easier had the GENCOP outrightly supported Netumbo. I think then it would have. So now the dynamics are different. So it's not quite an equal comparison, and it also speaks to the party's readiness as to scenario playing. If we found ourselves in a certain situation, how do we deal with it? It can also be at the country level. Maybe it's also something we should start discussing at the country level. If a president from a different party wins, how do you go about it?
Because we saw what happened in South Africa also. It was catastrophic, but again, the circumstances were similar to the current ones when Mbeki was party president, state president, and Zuma was party president, and they were not aligned at the Polokwane Congress or conference, as they call it. And somehow Zuma started undermining the state president to the point that he actually sort of recalled him using different forces.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, our systems are not the same, but it's still the same principles that they would use. But then it also speaks about the fact that our party systems are not solid, because it still seems like it's dependent on who's in power. Because you'd want the institution whereby those running the institution align themselves to the systems. So now it's sort of like the party aligns itself to the individual who's in charge. You don't want such a situation. That's not how you run an organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We go for a quick break and return for second half.
Flex is a health and fitness show that focuses on mind, body, and spirit. Flex aims to reach all audiences that would love to focus on the health of the mind, body, and spirit. The show is broadcasted on NTV, 1up2.com, and cross-shared on the following Facebook platforms: The Republican, Algemene Zeitung, Namibian Sun, Namibian Media Holdings, Sports Rec, Irongo, My Zone, We, and Ewi. Flex focuses on daily fitness, where we will be flexing our muscles, wellness interviews where we will be flexing our mind. For editorial and advertising queries, please contact zone@synergy.com.na.
NMH at 1 brings you news from all corners of Namibia. NMH at 1 aims to reach viewers countrywide who are interested in current affairs in a short and sweet format. This show is broadcasted on NTV, oneup2.com and cross-shared on the following Facebook platforms: The Republican, Algemeine Zeitung, Namibian Sun, Namibia Media Holdings, Irongo, and Vindic Express. To share your news or advertise on this platform, contact NMH1 at synergy.com.na. NMH at 1, your lunchtime news companion.
The show continues. Mathias, let's talk quickly about the headlines from last week about Netumbo having allegedly declined some, I think it's the Prime Minister's position, offered to her supposedly by President Hage Geingob. What is your reading of that situation?
If it's true, it wouldn't come as a surprise.
Yeah.
If you look at the hierarchy, it wouldn't make sense to give her that position right now. Ideally, you would give her the VP position of the state and, well, allow her to prepare herself. I mean, she's been around in the system for long. For you to now make her PM, I'm not sure if that's a promotion or a demotion for someone who is gearing themselves to represent the party as its candidate at the national elections. So there's a bit of a political anomaly there in that regard. So if indeed she did decline it sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
It sort of makes sense.
Yeah. But it would have been also, because what you want now really as a Swapo member is for the party to be as solidly united as possible going into 2024, and making Netumbo Prime Minister would have meant that one of her rivals at Congress, Sarah Madela, would have to make way for her. She has to be demoted into some other portfolio, if at all. And that would not have been very wise from a unity point of view.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. There's a lot of ways to look at it. Because also you don't want to be, it might be construed as you punishing her for exercising a democratic right to contest at Congress. So there's a lot of ways you can look at it. But then again, some have to lose for others to win.
Yeah.
And the party needs to make bold decisions in this regard. But you just don't, you want the situation whereby even when moves are made, it's still in the interest of the party, and you don't want to disenfranchise anyone in the process.
Yeah. There was some senior party leaders last year, I think Mbumba was one of them, who indicated the party central committee, I think the last one before Congress, that they would no longer be available for re-election or for deployment. But that was more in the context of party deployment and not very much, we do not know what they meant or what they intend on doing with their government positions. I think Doreen Sioka was one of them, Dr. Albert Kawana was another, Kachavivi was another one.
Yeah.
I think, if I remember correctly, Mbumba was one of them. So in that case, if Mbumba had already indicated his willingness to vacate, I don't know now whether that also applied to the state position, but I thought that would have been easier now for Geingob to say, look, since you are already on your way out anyways, why don't you just vacate this position so that we put Netumbo there and allow her then to warm herself into the state presidency at some stage.
Yeah. It also, as individuals in the party, they should also read the temperature in the room and say, me holding this position actually just creates unnecessary friction. And since you've already indicated that you are about to step away from the scene, why don't you then just make it easier? And because it will be in the interest of everyone. instead of it looking like you've been pushed out. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done as far as true unity within the ranks of the party is concerned before the elections. I mean, it's always a political rhetoric in their speeches and so on that the party is united, but when you see the situation on the ground, it's a very, very different story to what's being preached.
Yeah, and amid all these things, Mathias, because it can't be coincidental that somehow, because even when the president posts on Friday or Saturday saying, yeah, Netumbo is our sole candidate, it looks like a very superficial unity rhetoric again, because there's just so much that seems to suggest the two are not really gelling properly. From the remarks from Congress that there needs to be an extraordinary Congress, to him suddenly deciding he's no longer stepping away until 2027, and now to allegations that Netumbo has rejected his offer. These are not signs of a united leadership. The president and the vice president speaking in one tone.
I think it just cements a public perception that the two do not sit around one fire. Perhaps sometimes they are forced to. But of course, that's politics. People have different views. But then how do you converge those views in the interest of the party? That's what really needs to happen. I mean, as the two top leaders of the party, very senior political figures in the country, if there are any games being played, the other one would surely be able to pick that up. And it's certainly playing itself out in the public that it seems that the unity is more spoken than lived.
The last point I want to engage you on, Mathias, is the remarks that Netumbo made in Kaku. A lot of people talking about it. She had a go at the councillors in Windhoek not having succeeded really, or even replicated the supposed success of Swapo as leaders of the council at the time. Do you think this now is a full manifestation of what we've been saying all along in the media and elsewhere, that the opposition at the city of Windhoek have been squandering this window of opportunity and therefore creating a fertile ground for their opponents to come and say things that Netumbo said, for example?
Yeah, well, that's politics, but can one really say that Swapo has succeeded during the time it was in charge of the city? Of course, success is relative in this situation. Everyone will sing their own praises. The opposition might argue that how do you fix something that has been in place for over 30 years? It's not an overnight thing. So there's a lot of ways also to look at it. But I agree with viewpoints that I think in the city of Windhoek, it was a good window of opportunity to show that there is an alternative. So you sort of allow then Swapo to come through the back door again, because you could not live up to your promises. And they never really had time to really put their promises into action, because they were too busy with the dog fights on the council. So they never really got to work. So you can't really judge them based on that. But the fact that they couldn't pass the hurdle of working together, that already is a concern.
And Job Amupanda coming into the picture over the weekend, billboards across the country, he's standing for president. Do you think that he set himself up for negative perceptions by accepting that city council position? People have given examples of Lukato in Katima Molilo, whose party won one seat for their first ever seat, and the old man decided, no, I'll send someone else there. Here is Job Amupanda going to city council, becoming mayor, and becoming part of being caught up in this whole mess. And when you put up your hand for state president, people will reflect on that. And it has been a mess at the city of Windhoek. Do you think that would always count against him in some ways during these campaigns?
Yeah, it comes with the turf on which they are playing. As for the city of Windhoek, look, you always want to, I'm not saying he is the best in the movement, but you always want to send your best soldiers to the battlefield. Of course, there are a lot of shortcomings on the way that the movement has also dealt with things on the city council. So, of course, the negativity will always be there. But the fact that he put up his hand, clearly he has a plan. And whether the activities of council will then flow over onto his ambitions to run the country, that we'll see as time goes along. But I think it'll be a hurdle, a high hurdle. But there's a lot of dynamics that have changed over the years as far as voting is concerned in our country. But it will be an interesting run. Whoever decides to put up their hands again, it will be an interesting run.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But just thanks for your time.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah. That was tonight's show with Mathias Haufiku. He's my colleague at Namibian Sun. Thank you for watching.